All right, shalom everybody, and happy Hanukkah from Israel. Happy Hanukkah. I got with me my family.
Happy Hanukkah.
And we have people from all over who are watching. Welcome to the people on the Zoom, and welcome to the people who are on Facebook. Special welcome to the Hebrew Academy kindergarten class from Miami Beach. Hey guys, you're on mute, but that's okay. We know that you're probably making a lot of noise over there. And behind me is my wife Abby, who also went to the Hebrew Academy in Miami Beach for kindergarten.
Oh yeah, from when I'm 2 years old.
Okay, good. And here, who do we have behind me? Say hi.
Bella, hi.
This is Bella, and everyone's getting shy. Who's that? She's not shy.
Anna.
So say welcome to my channel. We're on Facebook.
Yeah.
This is Sophie.
Yeah.
All right, Sophie is a little older than kindergarten. That's okay. We're now about to light. Who knows what night of Hanukkah it is? Bella, what night of Hanukkah is it?
Fifth.
The fifth night of Hanukkah. So we're going to light 5 candles. And the kindergarten class knows what it's the 5th night, right, guys? Good. All right, we're going to light 5 candles and the shamash. So that's the helper candle, so 6 candles. And here we go. So we're going to say the blessings. There's 2 blessings we're going to say in Hebrew. Maybe we'll try to say them in English as well. And let's go. Akiva, are you going to help us with the singing?
For sure.
You upside down? No.
You look good.
Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'arvei she'elchanu.
Amen.
Eloheinu melech haolam she'asa nisim lavotenu bayamim hahem b'zman hazeh.
Amen.
אנחנו מדליקים על הישועה ועל המלחמה שעשית לאבותינו בימים ההם בזמן הזה על ידי כהניך הקדושים בכל שמונה חנוכה נאותה קודשי יש קודש בהם יצם סביבה כדי להודות ולם ושבחה גדול על ניסיך ועל מצוותיך ועל ישועתך
ישועתי משבח תיקון בית תפילתי חדמת פרח
מצורת מטבח
אז אגמור בשיר מזמור חנוכה מזבח
אז אגמור בשיר מזמור חנוכה מזבח.
I want to sing a song for you guys. Are you ready? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so they're going to sing a song for you, okay?
Amazing.
They're so excited.
All right, Abs, come on in here. Yeah. All right. Huh? All right. Akiva, let's pin them. Let's pin them. Yeah. Thank you guys
Alakavod.
so much. Thank you so much for joining us. And stay for the tour. Akiva is going to show us all of the places in Israel that are in the Hanukkah story. Go ahead, Akiva.
All righty. Thank you, Rabbi Tuly, and your whole beautiful family for inviting us into your home. Such a sweet moment to be able to light with you and witness and be with you for your lighting. So thank you. And we will now begin our virtual tour of Israel that is focused on Hanukkah. And I'm so excited to share this with you. Hanukkah is such a special time and such a special holiday. My kids laugh at me because they say every single time a new holiday comes along, I say, this is the most important Jewish holiday that there is, right? And I give them like 10 different reasons why. Like, but you said that about Passover. I'm like, no. Like, no, you said that about Rosh Hashanah. I'm like, no. Hanukkah, it's the most important Jewish holiday, right? So over the years, they've gotten used to me saying that. But the truth is that it's true. Really, the most important holiday is the one that we're celebrating right now. And every single Jewish holiday has what to teach us, what to give us, and really, bestows upon us blessing that we could use in our lives and share with the world. And that's really what we're doing here at Israel 365, is that we're sharing this blessing that is Israel with the world. And it's such an incredible thing to be able to share Israel with everyone here, whether through Zoom or through Facebook Live, or later on watching the recorded version of this. And we'll jump right into it because, as always, we do have a lot to do and a lot to see. And as always, great to see familiar faces and super cute to see all the kindergartners in Miami Beach, Florida. What a zchut, איזה זכות יש לנו, שאתם איתנו כאן ועכשיו. So let's begin, my friends. And I'm going to share my screen. And we are going to begin our virtual tour. All right. So let's begin, my friends. So already from the beginning, I'm making a little bit hungry with these donuts that appear on the first slide. Just hold off, wait a little bit. We'll get back to those donuts at the end, okay? But what I want to do is the following. There's a few different sections of this virtual tour. The first one is just a little bit of history to remind us of the historical context of the Hanukkah story and specifically how it connects and relates to Jerusalem. The second part is going to be focused on historical and archaeological sites in Israel that relate to either the Hanukkah story directly or the time period called the Hasmonean time period that the Hanukkah story takes place in. The next will be looking at the modern state of Israel and the cultural celebration of Hanukkah. So that's basically our agenda here. Let's begin, my friends. And I just want to start with this, right? Many people probably know what this is on the screen. This is the dreidel. It's a game that Jews around the world play on Hanukkah. You can play for money, you can play for candy, all these different things. Each of these Hebrew letters, the Nun, the Gimel, the Hey, and the Shin, stands for something else that you do, either you give or you get during the game. But the game actually goes back 2,200 years to the time of Hanukkah, when the Greeks were oppressing the Jews. And as we'll talk about a little bit more later, the Greeks outlawed many aspects of Judaism, and one of them was Torah study. And so the Jews who had that holy chutzpah, as we say, who were daring enough to keep studying Torah in secret, when the Greeks would come by, they would put away their books quickly, take out the dreidel, and pretend to play a game. And the Greeks would come by and say, "Oh, the Jews are just playing that silly game." Well, that silly game became a very, very important part of Hanukkah and a big symbol of the Hanukkah celebration and story. But if you notice here in this first slide, the four letters stand for Nes Gadol Haya Sham, which in English means a great miracle happened there. And this is the dreidel, or the sivivon, as we say in Hebrew, of Jews living outside of the land of Israel, in America, in Europe, in South Africa, Australia, wherever they may be, because they're talking about a great miracle that happened in the land of Israel. So they're talking about over there, right? But when you come to Israel, the dreidel has one different letter, but that one difference makes all the difference in the world, right? The letters are Nes Gadol, or Nun Gimel Hey Pe, which stands for Nes Gadol Haya Po, right? A great miracle happened here, right? And although, of course, Jews can celebrate Hanukkah anywhere in the world with great festivity and with great meaning and with great joy, and they do, in Israel, because we're celebrating a miracle, we're celebrating a story, we are remembering a piece of our history that took place in this soil, in this land where I and over 7 other million Jews are living today. It takes on an added meaning, right? And Nes Gadol Haya Po, a great miracle happened here in our land, in our homeland. And really, one of the essential teachings of the Hanukkah story is to remind us, the Jewish people, of where our homeland is. And the fact that we live in miraculous times, that the Jewish people have returned home. I mean, just think about it. For over 2,000 years, the Jewish people were celebrating Hanukkah, and almost everyone in the Jewish world was saying a great miracle happened there. Now, today, in the year 2020, half the Jewish people, half of Am Yisrael, half of the nation of Israel are saying a great miracle happened here, because we have returned to our homeland and we're celebrating Hanukkah in our homeland again. And it's an incredible, incredible thing, right? I personally feel incredibly privileged to be part of this generation and this time in history that we actually get to live through it and witness it. So let's move on, all right? And let's go to Jerusalem, because when people think about Hanukkah, they think about Jerusalem, rightfully so, because the main miracle happens in Jerusalem, right? It happens in the temple in Jerusalem, as we will see very, very soon, all right? But when we think about Jerusalem today, this is usually the picture that comes to our minds: the Holy Kotel, the Holy Wall, the Wailing Wall, the Western Wall. But we have to remember that the Kotel is part of something bigger. Let's zoom out a little bit, right? The Kotel is part of the Temple Mount. Right, this huge rectangular area that was built during the Second Temple period in the 1st century BCE by King Herod, who was the last king of Israel appointed by the Romans. Now, the Romans are already after the Hanukkah story, so we're jumping forward a little bit, but just understand that today we still obviously have the Temple Mount, and this goes back 2,000 years to King Herod, 1st century BCE. Right, he builds this giant platform, so to speak, around the temple to allow for a beautiful and comfortable place for thousands and thousands of Jews to come and visit the temple during the pilgrimage holidays that we have throughout the year. So the Kotel is great, and the Kotel, of course, is holy, but it's not the holy site in Judaism. Right? The holy site in Judaism is on top of the Temple Mount, and that is where the Holy Temple, the first temple and the second temple, the Beit HaMikdash, once stood, and that's right where the Dome of the Rock stands today. If you look at this next slide, this is Jerusalem 2,000 years ago, again in the Roman times after the Hanukkah story, but this is the Jerusalem that we know of from King Herod times, with the Temple Mount, with this massive, massive area that King Herod builds around the temple. Okay, and the Kotel that we know today would be where I'm putting my marker here, my highlighter, from this bridge, this arch, all the way to almost this door over here. that would be where the kotel would be. Now, back then, they didn't daven at the kotel. They didn't pray at the kotel because they went to the temple, right? You didn't pray outside the temple if you can go in the temple. The only reason we pray by the kotel today is because we don't have the temple anymore, and we're not in full control of the Temple Mount. So the kotel has become the next best thing, right? But back then, when the temple stood, nobody went to the kotel. It was the wall, with all due respect. Okay, moving on. Just look at this picture that shows us literally the bottom picture is today the Temple Mount with the Dome of the Rock and the El Aqsa Mosque to the south. These are buildings that are very holy to Islam, of course, built around 13 centuries ago at the end of the 7th century. But like I said, the temple, the first and the second temple, stood right where the Dome of the Rock stands today, right? And that's when it was in full Jewish control during the first and second temple period. Okay, let's understand a little bit of the geography. We know that the Jews were commanded to build the temple on Mount Moriah, which is represented by this model, and they did. This is the first temple. It lasts for over 400 years. It gets destroyed by the Babylonians. The Jews are exiled to Babylonia. The Persians take over the Babylonians, and then the Persians allowed the Jews to come back. The Jews right away build the second temple in the same place, same location, in the same exact way. There were a few differences, but for the most part, exactly the same as the first temple. Okay, and again, not only till King Herod comes does he, make this massive temple mount around the temple. All right, this is Jerusalem in the first temple period, a small city on a hill. The temple is up here in the north, in the far end of the city. And this is Jerusalem in the second temple period. It grows massively. It grows to the west, it grows to the north. All right, but the highlight of Jerusalem back then, of course, is the temple. And we can see once again the Temple Mount, right? This rectangular, huge area that surrounds the temple, which is in the middle. Here's a closer look at the temple. Here we have the temple. And why am I focusing on the temple again? To remind us, because the Hanukkah story happens right there. I mean, the Hanukkah story is connected to the revolt, to the uprising of the Jews, but the main miracle, the main reason we have Hanukkah is because of what happens inside that temple. So let's go inside that temple. All right. We have this building inside Kodei Heichal, or the sanctuary. All right, but outside there's a very important part of the temple as well. What is that? It's the altar, the mizbeach, right? On this giant altar, which was about 12 feet high, 30, 40 feet long, the priests, or the Kohanim, would offer sacrifices multiple times a day, every single day. And while they did, the Leviim, or the Levites, would play music every single day. There was music being played in the temple, in the Beit HaMikdash. All right, sacrifices and music and sacrifices going hand in hand. All right, and this is what's happening on the outside part of the temple. What's happening inside this building, though, right, is this. This is what you see inside the sanctuary, inside the Heichal. The first thing you come to is a small altar called the incense altar, where the priests would light beautiful smelling incense made out of 11 different plants and spices. To the right were these special tables made out of gold, and these special breads placed on them that the priests would eat on Shabbat. Over here behind the curtain is the Holy of the Holies, the holiest place in the temple, the holiest place in Judaism, the holiest place in the world, according to Judaism, where originally in the first temple you had the Ark of the Covenant, and the high priest would only go in there one time of the year on Yom Kippur. The rest of the year, he never went in. Nobody went in. Only he went in on Yom Kippur. And of course, here to the left, we have the menorah, the golden menorah, which is a huge part of the temple service that was done every single day. Every single day, a different Kohen or priest would be given the honor of lighting the menorah for that day. They first clean out the ashes from the previous day. They pour the pure, you can't imagine pure olive oil, more pure olive oil than this. It was made in a special kind of way. It was put in special flasks. It had a seal in it to make sure that everyone knew it was kosher. And they would take one of these flasks every single day and use that oil to light the 7 lamps of the menorah. All right, there was a storage room in the temple that had all these different flasks of oil that the priest would go and take one a day to light the menorah. Okay, connected to the Hanukkah story, of course. And so this menorah was a very, very special part of the temple service. 7 branches, 3 on either side, 1 in the middle. Think about 7. Think about Shabbat, the Sabbath, the holy 7th day. All right, and many other things connected to 7. Now, I think it's important to say that the menorah was not used only for physical light. Yes, obviously it gave off physical light, but that wasn't its ultimate purpose. Its ultimate purpose was to share spiritual light. right? The physical light was really just how do I say, like a vessel, so to speak, for the spiritual light that he gave off into the world. Right? And really the menorah was representing the light of God, the light of Torah, the light of Judaism, the light of the land of Israel, the light of the Jewish people that was shining out into the world from the temple. Right? We know that when King Solomon builds the temple, he invites the whole world to come and pray. He invites the whole world to come and experience the awesomeness of the one God. All right. And the menorah really represents that on some level more than anything else in the temple, was this light, this spiritual light, this goodness, reminding us what we're supposed to do in this world to bring more light into the world, to banish the darkness, right? And bring goodness into the world. Well, fast forward a little bit from the Second Temple period, right? We already said this, but I'll repeat it again. The Jews were exiled once by the Babylonians. After they destroyed the first temple, they were brought back by the Persians. They were allowed to build the second temple. The Persians are in control of the land of Israel, but the Jews were given religious freedom for the most part. And then the 4th century, this man comes, Alexander the Great. And with the Greek army, conquers the land of Israel from the Persians. Most of the ancient world he conquers. And now the Greeks are in control of the land of Israel and the Jews living inside of it. Now, what happens is at the beginning, for the most part, he lets the Jews be Jews. He doesn't get Judaism. He doesn't, believe in Judaism. It doesn't make sense to him, but he lets the Jews be Jews. But he also brings his own Greek culture, and that's called Hellenism, right? And we can have a whole class just on the differences between Hellenism and Judaism. But just for now, I'll say, for the most part, Hellenism focused on the body, on physical pleasures, on eating as much as you want, and drinking as much as you want, and celebrating and partying as much as you want, on physical strength and the beauty of the body, right? The Olympics come out of the Greek culture. Walking around in the nude, and all these other things that are just in stark contrast to Judaism and Jewish values, which is much more about the soul and the heart. And that they are more important than the body. Of course, the body is also from God, but the soul should be the one to lead the body, not the other way around. So when Alexander the Great introduces Hellenism into the land of Israel, the Jewish people are in a little bit of a dilemma here. Right? And they each, react in their own different ways. Some Jews are like, we don't want any of that. Stay away from us. We have Judaism. That's all we want. That's all we need. Other Jews are like, maybe we can mix a little bit of Hellenism into Judaism. Maybe we can get the best of both worlds. And other Jews were like, you know what? I like Hellenism. I'm going to kind of like put my Judaism on hold for now and really kind of become a Hellenist. And you had different Jews reacting in different ways. Anyway, all of that changes when this man comes to town. And this is Antiochus IV. All right, this is in the 2nd century BCE, and he is now in control. And he will be the first to really force Hellenism upon the Jews. All right, he will oppress the Jews really, really for the first time. And what happens is basically this. Antiochus IV, his father, Antiochus III, had taken control of choosing who is the high priest in Jerusalem, which is the most important position in the Jewish world back then. Now, it used to be before that, it was based on merit, on righteousness, on morality, on who was like a real upstanding person. Once his father, Antiochus III, takes over, he just basically does like this, puts out his hand and says, whichever Kohen priest can put more money in my hand gets to be the high priest. And Jews actually did this. Unfortunately, Jewish priests bought into his game and bribed Antiochus III, and then after him, his son, Antiochus IV. And now the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, was basically a position that wasn't based on righteousness, was based on how deep one's pockets were. And that brought a lot of corruption to the priests, to the temple, and to Jerusalem in general. Basically, eventually, Antiochus IV, during his reign, he appoints a certain Kohen priest to be the high priest. But then another priest who wanted to be the high priest gathered an army and fought against this other priest. And like a little civil war breaks out in Jerusalem. And when Antiochus IV hears about this, he brings in his army into Jerusalem and slaughters the Jews there. And after that, he punishes them even more and passes laws against Judaism throughout the land of Israel. Certain aspects of Judaism became illegal, and anyone caught practicing them would be punished by death. Right? What were those parts of Judaism that were made illegal? He made illegal Shabbat observance. He made illegal Torah study. He made illegal circumcision. right? The bris, the Brit Milah. And he also made illegal the celebrating of Rosh Chodesh, which is the first day of any Jewish month in the Hebrew calendar, which really helps us understand which days our holidays fall on, which is obviously very important. Right, so it's a really intense time for the Jews, and they will react in different ways. Okay, some of them will leave the land of Israel. They say, we're leaving, we want to keep Judaism, and we can't do it here, we're leaving. Hopefully we can come back one day. Other Jews say, we're going to stay, we're just going to put our Judaism on hold for now because we don't want to leave the land and we don't want to endanger our lives. Other Jews will stay in the land of Israel, and they will keep practicing their Judaism in secret, knowing that they're risking their lives, and some of them will be caught. And some of them will actually be killed by the Greeks. I just want to make a side note here that this is the first time in Jewish history that Jews are being oppressed for being Jews. Historians say that it's that the Greeks invented, so to speak, anti-Semitism. That anti-Semitism begins with the Greeks, because before this, any hardships we experienced by the Assyrians or by the Babylonians, that was all political, nothing to do with our religion. They weren't oppressing us because we kept Shabbat, right? Or we kept kosher. They were oppressing us because we didn't do what they said. Right? But with the Greeks, it begins that because we're Jews, they're oppressing us. All right, and this is a whole new chapter in Jewish history. Well, a fourth reaction to these anti-Jewish laws is revolt, to rising up and revolting against the Greeks. And this revolt begins in the city of Modi'in. All right, now there is a modern city of Modi'in in the state of Israel today, but there was an ancient city of Modi'in as well. And when the Greeks got to this town, right, they did there what they did in other towns around the country as well. They would gather up the Jews and they would force them to bow down to idols. They would build an altar and force the Jews to sacrifice a pig on that altar. And it was a huge embarrassment and a huge blow to the Jewish pride. And when they got to the city of Modi'in, there was a man in the crowd. His name was Mattatyahu. And when they forced the Jews to bow down to idols and sacrifice a pig, he could not take it anymore. He became so angry. He became so irate. He jumped out of the crowd. He took out his sword and he ran towards the Greek soldiers and he killed them right on the spot. And then he screamed and he said, Mila Hashem Elai, whoever is for God, come with me. And he runs to the mountains, right, like in a Hollywood movie. And his 5 sons follow him. They're going to be known as the Maccabees. One of his sons is Judah, the Maccabee. And he gathers an army of about a few thousand Jews, and they take on the Greek army, which is the strongest army in the world at the time. They know that. They don't care, because they will do whatever they have to do to try their best to fight off the Greeks and get them out of the land and to end this anti-Semitic oppression. Now, I want to take you through a few sites now in Israel that relate to this time period of Hanukkah, specifically, or this general time period, what's called the Hasmoneans. The Hasmoneans, that was the family of Mattatyahu and his sons and the Maccabees who led this revolt. They're known as the Hasmoneans. And this time period is known as the Hasmonean time period. Now, this is the modern city of Modi'in, named after the ancient city of Modi'in, where the Hanukkah story begins. All right, tens of thousands of Israelis live there. Many Americans who moved to Israel moved to Modi'in. All right, but within the modern city of Modi'in and on its outskirts, you will find the ancient city of Modi'in as well. And here's our first example of archaeology dating back to the time of Hanukkah. Right, friends who have been with me on other virtual tours where we talk about archaeology, right? You know, we say so often that the Jewish past is all over the land of Israel, and for the past many decades, you know, since the start of Israel, even before the start of Israel, archaeologists have been digging in this land and literally finding the remnants, the artifacts, the evidence, the support, the proof for the stories of the Tanakh, right, including the story of Hanukkah. And it's incredible. In this spot specifically, just right next to the modern city of Modi'in, archaeologists found dwellings that go back to the Roman times, around 2,000 years ago. And underneath them, 200 years older, they found dwellings right in this spot that we see in the picture that go back to the time of the Hasmoneans, to the time of the Hanukkah story. All right, down the road from this, just towards the entrance of the modern city of Modi'in, people pass this all the time. All right, It's outdoors. You see some rocks. There's like a small structure there. Not everyone understands what it is when they're passing by. I didn't know what it was for many years when I was passing it by many times. And then I learned that this over here, this rectangular space, is a floor that belonged to a Jewish synagogue dating 2,200 years ago. An archaeologist exposed it, excavated it, studied it, and analyzed it, and dated it back to the time of the Hanukkah story. And this synagogue right here is the oldest synagogue they've ever found in Israel. All right, Jews were praying in here 2,200 years ago during the Second Temple period. But not only that, some archaeologists take another step forward and they say that it could be right here where Jews got together to talk about and to plan and to execute the revolt against the Greeks, right, which brought us obviously the story and the holiday of Hanukkah. Now, Israelis pass on this road all the time, going in and out of Modi'in, on the way to work, on the way, home from work, on the way to soccer practice, on the way to a friend's house. And that's just how Israel is. These archaeological sites that, again, reach back in time to the ancient Jewish past are scattered all over the land of Israel. And many of them are connected to this Hasmonean period and the story of Hanukkah. Let's move on. Also outside of Jerusalem to the northwest is a place called Nebi Samuel. That's Arabic for Kever Shmuel, or the grave of Samuel, from the Hebrew Bible, right? Samuel being the last of the judges and the prophet himself, and he crowns King Saul the king, and also King David he finds. All right, well, he's buried here. And like in many places in Israel, there's different layers of history because there's so much history in this land. But one of the layers of history that archaeologists found here is a Hasmonean quarter, a whole set of buildings, of dwellings. This is the aerial view. You can see it on the bottom right corner here, and here it is close up. They found all these dwellings, all these buildings, these houses, right, where Jews lived 2,200 years ago. And they say there's no reason not to think that the Jews living here took part in the revolt against the Greeks. They lived just outside of Jerusalem. They were in the center of the land where it was all breaking out, where it was all taking place. And I mean, right through that window, you can imagine a Jewish family 2,200 years ago, and they're living at the time as Hanukkah is unfolding, right? As the Hanukkah story is unfolding before their eyes, right? And there's this hope in the air that we're going to get rid of the Greeks in this land, and we're going to regain our Jewish independence, and we're going to regain the temple. And of course that happened. Right? And it's an amazing thing to see where the Jews lived during this time period. All right. I'm going to fast forward through this one. I'm going to go over here. Okay. This is not a historical site that I'm going to show you, but it's a story from the Hanukkah story. All right. That is about one of the Maccabees, one of the sons of Mattatyahu. His name is Elazar. Now, we don't know much about Elazar, but there is this one very famous story where there was a very famous battle, very important battle south of Jerusalem. And as in other battles, the Greeks brought in their war elephants, right? Scary, big animals, right? They'd sit upon and just plow through the Jewish soldiers. And Elazar saw this war elephant coming into the battle, and he ran over to it, wanting to protect his people. And he took his long spear and he pushed it right into the elephant's side, killing the elephant. But at the same time, the elephant collapsed over and fell right on top of Elazar and squashed him to death. And he literally gave his life for his people. This battle took place, as I said, in the south of Jerusalem. And today, if you look at a map of the area south of Jerusalem, in an area called Gush Etzion, you see lots of Jewish communities, Efrat, Alon Shvut, Kfar Etzion, and also you see a community called Elazar, named after him. Right? So this is not a historical site or an archaeological site, although it is just down the road from where archaeologists believe the battle was, but you have a whole community named after one of the Maccabees. And that's also an important part of Jewish history in the land of Israel, and specifically the story of Hanukkah in the land of Israel, that pieces and parts and people that are part of the history in general and Hanukkah in specific, their names appear all over Israel. Communities are named after them. Streets are named after them. Right? The first prime minister of Israel, David Ben-Gurion, was very, very adamant about bringing back the ancient names of the Jewish people and Jewish history and using them for our towns, cities, communities, streets as much as possible. And you see it all over the place. You can drive through places like Jerusalem and Tel Aviv and do a history tour just following the street signs and talking about all the different people who the streets are named after. Anyway, moving forward, right, one of the most important archaeological sites having to do with the Hanukkah story is right outside the old city in Jerusalem, just outside the old city walls. It's in an area called the Givati parking lot. Why is it called that? Because this area that we see in the slide right now, there used to be a parking lot covering all of it. They couldn't see any of this. There was a parking lot, and the city of David, which is a very important archaeological center just across the street, an amazing place to learn about and visit. We actually did a virtual tour of them a bunch of weeks ago. They wanted to build a museum there, but archaeologists said, hold on, let's do an archaeological survey and make sure there's nothing important there. And then if you don't find anything important, you can build your museum. They did the archaeological survey, and they're digging deeper and deeper into the ground, getting into older and older layers. And they go through all the typical layers of the land of Israel. And eventually they get down to a Roman layer, and they keep digging, and they get back down to an older layer than the Roman layer, which is the Greek layer. And they are so excited, and they are celebrating. Why? Even though it's not the first time that they ever found a Greek layer in an archaeological site in Israel, what they found was walls, right? And a building that basically they knew to be a citadel or a fortress. And why were they so excited? Because historians from thousands of years ago wrote, both Jewish and non-Jewish historians wrote that the Greeks, when they were in control of the land of Israel, they built a fortress just outside the Temple Mount, in order to keep an eye on the Jews. All right? But no archaeologists found it yet. They were looking here and looking there. They're looking all over Jerusalem. They couldn't find it. And finally, when they dug underneath this parking lot, they found this fortress. And the archaeologists were celebrating like crazy that they finally found this Greek fortress called an Akra, right, as noted in the writings of these historians. But not only that, what gave them even more support and confidence to declare this the Greek fortress is that they also found evidence of Jews living in that same area, Jews living in that fortress and using that fortress, which gave support, archaeological support, to the fact that the historians also wrote that this Greek fortress was eventually captured by the Jews during the Hanukkah story, that the Jews attacked this fortress when they're uprising against the Jews, and they took it out of the hands of the Greeks. So in this place, just outside of the old city walls, a few steps from the Kotel, right, the archaeologists found that the Greek fortress and found the remnants of Jewish life in this fortress, which gave support and evidence to the fact that, yes, the Jews, during the Hanukkah story and during the revolt against the Greeks, overtook this Greek fortress. One of the Jewish artifacts amongst many that they found, we see in this slide right here, and this is a piece of a bowl made out of chalk, and on it has Hebrew letters, right? And the Hebrew letters spell out a name called Hyrcanus, which was a very common name back then, but it was also the name of two very, very important Jewish leaders, kings, in fact. One was also the high priest, together as being the king. All right, John Hyrcanus the first and John Hyrcanus the second. Now, archaeologists don't know, and they probably never will know which Hyrcanus this was it just like an everyday kind of Hyrcanus, or was it one of these Jewish leaders? Probably never will be known, but still it's very exciting to see, right, evidence of Jewish life exactly in the area of this Greek fortress. Some evidence of the Greeks living in this fortress were some spearheads that they found, which were inscribed with Greek images, even the inscribing of the name of their leader, Antiochus IV. They also found tons of these handles that were part of clay jugs and vessels that held wine in it. They know that wine was in there because the seal that was imprinted on the clay handle said so, and even said where the wine was from back in Greece, which meant that was not kosher wine, because it was made by the Greeks, which means this wine was imported to the land of Israel for the Greek soldiers and the Greeks to drink in Jerusalem, which again, you just see this overlap of Greek life in Jerusalem and Jewish life in Jerusalem, and really just giving incredible support to the historical documentation of this time period. I want to show you, now that we've looked through some archaeological sites, and there are more, but it would take us hours if not days to go through all of them. I want to just highlight the use of the menorah. Now, of course, let's just finish our story with Hanukkah, right? The Greeks passed these laws, the Jews revolt in the year approximately 168, 167 BCE. About 3 years later, the Jews get to Jerusalem and they overtake the Greeks in Jerusalem. They take the temple back and they clear out the temple of all the idols that the Greeks put in it. They smash the altar because the Greeks used pigs on it. They clean up the temple, build a new altar, and then they go and look for some oil to light the menorah for the first time in a very long time. And of course, we know the story that they looked and they looked and they only can find one little vessel of oil. They use that to light the menorah. And to their shock and surprise, it didn't only last one day, but it lasts 8 days, right? And with this story, right, the menorah becomes this symbol of Jewish victory, of Jewish pride, of Jewish strength, of Jewish identity. And you'll see this symbol being used all around Jewish life, around the land of Israel and beyond. And here's just one example. This is kind of like a short, stubby stone table that was used by Jews in synagogue to put books on and use like as a table to learn from and read from. You can see this beautiful inscription on the side. This goes back to the 1st century CE. All right, here also back to the 1st century CE. This was found in a home in the old city in Jerusalem, which dates back to around the destruction of the Second Temple in the year 70 CE. This was drawn on the wall of a house by probably a priest who knew what the menorah looked like, right? Because only the priests were actually able to see it. All right, I'm just going to fast forward to this. This actually was found in a cave north of Jerusalem, outside of a modern Arab village called Mukhmas, but that's reminiscent of an ancient Jewish village called Michmas. And this was actually found many decades ago. It was documented, it was written about, put in a folder and put in a file cabinet, and people forgot about it. And that file cabinet with that folder was just discovered or rediscovered literally just a few days ago. At least they shared it with the Israeli public just a few days ago, just in time for Hanukkah. I think they do that every single year in Israel, share something exciting and fun and connected to the Hanukkah story just around Hanukkah, just to make it even a more awesome celebration. But this was found, you can see in this picture, right? This menorah on the bottom of the picture inscribed on the walls of this cave. And it just goes to show that the menorah was this symbol that was widely used by Jews to express themselves and express their pride in being Jewish. This is a drawing of the drawing just to make it a little bit more clear. All right. But that takes us to one last thing I want to show you. And this was literally just shared with the Israeli public a couple of days ago. And this is an ancient oil, what would you call, lamp. This is an ancient oil lamp. Sorry for the blurriness of this picture, but it's so brand new and hot off the press that I couldn't even find clear pictures of it on the internet. But it looked like this. This is not what they found. This is an example of another oil lamp from thousands of years ago, made out of clay. They'd have this big hole in the middle. They'd pour olive oil into it. And from the second smaller hole, they put a long wick in it that would soak up the oil. They light it, and this was an ancient candle, as you can see in this picture, next to a modern day candle. All right, and they just found this one specifically, the one I showed you, in the city of David, in an area that they're excavating right now called the Pilgrimage Road, where Jews walked on to go up to the temple during the Second Temple times. And it's a very exciting archaeological find that dates back anywhere, they say, from between the Hasmonean time period to the Roman time period. But very, very exciting and somewhat also connected to the whole Hanukkah story. Let's go to the next part of our tour. And I want to focus on the modern state of Israel right now, and a celebration of Hanukkah and its connection to the Hanukkah story. All right, we can see here, hold on one second. We can see here that in the seal of the state of Israel, in like the image, the symbol that is the state of Israel, of all the different things that could have been put onto the seal, it's the menorah, right? Which reminds us of Jerusalem and specifically the temple, but more so reminds us of the story of Hanukkah, right? Because the early Zionists, who were the first Jews to come back to the land of Israel after 2,000 years of exile and work like crazy for a Jewish state, they were deeply inspired by the Maccabees and the Hanukkah story, because they too were facing incredible challenges, incredible obstacles in their way, just like the Jews during the Hanukkah story with the Greeks. And the Zionists were inspired by the Maccabees, who fought hard, worked hard, and overcame and reached their goals and brought their dreams to life. And that's what the Zionists wanted to do. And they were inspired by the Maccabees and the Hanukkah story. And that's why the menorah became such a symbol of the early years of Zionism, Zionism in general, and the state of Israel once it gets created in 1948, as we can see right here. And you see menorahs all over the land of Israel. This is a beautiful one just outside the Knesset, the Israeli government building in Jerusalem. This was actually donated to Israel by the United Kingdom and on its 8th birthday in 1956. But the UK knew that the menorah was a very special symbol to the Jewish people and to Israel specifically, and that's why they gave it to them as a gift. You can see Hanukkah menorahs all over Israel. You can see it on rooftops, on housetops, on apartment buildings, on synagogues, and they say they're all year round. Of course, they're only lit on Hanukkah, but they're just there as an ever-present symbol of the Jewish people. And it's incredible. You can see this beautiful golden menorah in the Jewish quarter in the old city of Jerusalem. And it's built according to the instructions of the Torah. And many people believe that this could be used when the third temple is built. This can be transferred right into the temple, ready for use. Pretty amazing. We're ready. We're getting ready. We're almost there. All right. In culture and in everyday society, you see the Hanukkah menorah in stamps and in art museums. All right. And these are, again, just examples of how widespread the symbol of the menorah is in Israeli and Jewish life. Of course, on Hanukkah itself, Israel projects the Hanukkah menorah on the walls of the old city of Jerusalem, as we see in this picture. And they can do that because it's a Jewish state, right? And the Jews are back home, and that's what we can do. And we know that Jews still today live all around the world with all kinds of people, and it's a beautiful thing. But there's something about being home, being in our own homeland, in our original home, where we can put up our own decorations. I know growing up in New York, in America, love all the other religions and love all the other traditions, of course, with great respect. But I always felt like, around the holiday times, my people's story or celebration of their holiday wasn't present in the public sphere. You never saw Hanukkah decorations in the public sphere when I was growing up in America. And in Israel today, in Jerusalem, and all over the country, you see the Chanukiah, the Hanukkah menorah, being lit up all throughout the week, weeks in advance even. And it's a nice feeling. It's another reminder that we're home in our homeland, and that we've returned after 2,000 years. The next thing I want to show you is a beautiful aspect of the celebration of Hanukkah in Israel. Now, a lot of Jews in the world today, they light the Hanukkah menorah inside their house, on the kitchen table, on the counter, wherever. It's great, it's fine, it's beautiful, it's perfect, okay? But if you look in the books of Jewish law, they say the ideal place, the best place to light the Hanukkah menorah is outside your house, just next to your front door. Why? Because the whole idea of lighting the Hanukkah menorah is to publicize the story of Hanukkah and the miracle specifically, right? But what happened? Because of anti-Semitism and oppression, over the 2,000 years of Jewish exile, some Jews are like, maybe I don't want to publicize that a Jew lives here. And they went inside with the Hanukkah lighting. And that's how it stayed for many Jews up until today. But with Jews coming back to their homeland, to the land of Israel, Jews are like, we're home. We feel safe. We feel strong. We got the IDF, and we got the government, and we got God behind us. We're going back outside to light. And you see tons of Jews throughout the country lighting every single night just outside their doors. It's a beautiful thing. Where they live in an apartment building or in a house, they get these glass cases and they put their Hanukkah menorah inside of it and they light outside. Not everybody, I'll be honest with you, I light inside my house with my family, and it's also beautiful and special and meaningful. But a lot of Jews in Israel, they decide to light outside in these glass cases. And it's an incredible thing to see. You see little kids staring outside in their winter clothes, being outside, just looking at these beautiful lights. You see families getting together outside to light, getting on their winter coats. All right. And look at this picture. Those who live in an apartment building, they all want to get their Hanukkah menorah like as close to the door as possible. So they just all kind of, crowd the space, and you get over 20 different menorahs there. And it's an amazing thing to see. There's literally tours. Israelis go on tours of places like Bnei Brak, Jerusalem, Sfat, and other places where lots of people light outside, and they go on these night tours around 5 o'clock, 5:30 to see the people in their communities lighting outside. It's a very special thing in Israel to do. This year with COVID, people aren't really doing it, but other years it's a very, very big tradition to take one of these tours. Okay, we're doing it virtually this year. I'm taking you there myself. look at this picture. I mean, it's like the Jewish people in their homeland, Hanukkah, the lights are shining, even if it's dark outside, even if it's rainy or windy, the lights don't go out. One, because of the glass encasement, but it's also a spiritual thing, right? That the lights of the Jewish people are lasting and shining forever, right? And the fact that we're back in our home and that we're able to do this just brings a whole nother special meaning to the celebration of Hanukkah. Look at this beautiful picture. Even if you're going to light inside, you're doing it by window to share with the world the light of Hanukkah, the light of the miracle that God did for the Jewish people 2,200 years ago, and also, just the light of holiness, the light of God, right? The light of the land of Israel, right? Spreading to all four corners of the world. Look at this, such a sweet picture to see, such a sweet sight. This light, just on the side of a road, shining bright for anyone to see. But having mentioned the word sweet, we're going to end with one last thing, the sweetest part of this tour of all. Right, I've talked a lot about history and archaeology and all these different sites and menorahs. I definitely made you very, very hungry. So we're going to end with some food. All right, we're going to end with some donuts, or as we say in Hebrew, sufganiot, which comes from the Hebrew word lisfog, which means to absorb, because the donuts absorb all the oil that they're cooked in. And you got the classic jelly donut with the powdered sugar on top. You can go to an Israeli bakery, buy as many of them as you want, but it doesn't stop there. I highly recommend you don't stop at the jelly donuts, but check these out. The Israeli bakeries go nuts on Hanukkah. It's like a competition. It's like a bakery, Olympics. Who can make the best donuts? Who can make the most creative donuts, the most colorful, the yummiest? And literally, the Israeli newspapers rate them. They always have their top 3 bakeries, and every bakery is striving to be, one of those. And it's an amazing and fun thing to see. Just all the different kinds. I've never seen donuts like this growing up in America. These are sweet. These are cute. These are kind of plain, even these are nice, but nothing like this. Look at this. You get these donuts with these squeezy things in it, where the bakery allows you to squeeze the chocolate cream or the jelly into the donut yourself. It's unbelievable. It's so fun. It's so yummy. All these different flavors and tastes. These are donuts. They look like gourmet cakes. These are donuts that only come out on Hanukkah. The cool thing about donuts in Israel, we don't have donut shops here. Like in America, we have Dunkin' Donuts and things like that. We don't have that in Israel. Donuts only come out during Hanukkah. Yes, the bakery start making them 2 months before Hanukkah, okay. But the second Hanukkah's over, the donuts are gone, and you're not going to see them again until next year. As soon as Hanukkah is over, they start baking the next holiday's baked good, which is the Humantashins, right, for Purim. All right. But they go nuts as it gets closer and closer and closer to Hanukkah. And of course, on Hanukkah itself, they just, bust open the gates and let their creativity fly. Look at these donuts. You've never seen anything like it. I've never seen anything like this outside of Israel, right? The blueberry filling you can squeeze in yourself. This is a really great bakery called Roladin. My wife and I, we take our kids there once every Hanukkah, and they get to ooh and ah over all the awesome donuts, and they can choose whatever they want, and it's part of our celebration of Hanukkah. And it's just fun. It's sweet. It's awesome. It's festive, right? We know the Jewish people love to eat, and Hanukkah is no exception. In fact, check out this statistic. On average, every year, Israelis eat collectively over 24 million donuts just during the holiday of Hanukkah, which is quite an incredible amount. And I wrote down the number of something else because I knew I was going to forget. Check this out. 10.8 billion calories just during Hanukkah, just in donuts. That's wild. That shows commitment and dedication to the story of Hanukkah. Okay, but just to wrap up this tour, right? Here's a baker putting on the finishing touches of some of these incredible donuts. But as much as we love the donuts, we know that it's deeper than the donuts. And to wrap up our tour, I just want to say this: that after the Jews defeated the Greeks in the 2nd century BCE, they regained their independence in the land of Israel for the first time in hundreds of years. That independence lasts for about 100 years, a little bit less. And then the Romans come in and take that independence away in the year 63 BCE. About 130 years later, in the year 70 CE, the Romans destroyed the Second Temple after 4 years of the Jews fighting the Romans, trying to get the Romans out. That time the Jews lost, unfortunately, and they destroyed the temple. They destroyed the Second Temple. They took 100,000 Jews as slaves. Many of them they put on ships and brought to Rome. And another thing they put on a ship and brought to Rome was the menorah. As you can see in this picture, this is the inside of the Arch of Titus that was created when Titus, the general, destroyed the Second Temple in Jerusalem. And this was part of the celebration of the Roman victory over the Jews. And you can see inside of the arch, this close-up, Jewish slaves carrying the menorah through the streets of Rome, the biggest embarrassment to the Jewish people. Right, that was 2,000 years ago, and for 2,000 years, the Jews were in exile. They're outside of their land of Israel. Only a few Jews remained inside the land of Israel during those 2,000 years of exile. And the Jews longed, and they prayed, and they yearned, and they cried over Jerusalem and the temple, and to return to the land of Israel. And eventually, they did. The Jewish people returned. The prophecies came to life. Right, and we're living in the time of those prophecies. It's unbelievable, right? That's why Israelis are eating so many donuts, right? Because of these prophecies that have become fulfilled in our day and age. But it's an amazing thing to see that the Jews have returned home. And once again, we're in our homeland, which means I can walk into a supermarket in Israel today, in the modern Jewish state, and I can see my people's celebration. I can see the Hanukkah menorah on Hanukkah staring me in the face as soon as I walk into the store to go food shopping. And this is what you see all over Israel during Hanukkah. You see Hanukkah, you see the menorah, you see the donuts, and you're just reminded, wow, the Jewish people, like, we're really home. We really have returned home, and the story has come full circle. And it's an incredible, incredible thing. And it brings us back to one of the first things I share with you, that in Israel, when we play the dreidel game, which my kids just played, an hour ago on the carpet downstairs, we play with this dreidel that says Nes Gadol Haya Po, that a great miracle happened here. Right? And as I said before, you can celebrate Hanukkah anywhere in the world and have a meaningful and festive experience of celebration of Hanukkah. But in Israel, there's an extra and added special element because we're celebrating a story and a miracle that happened not out there, but in here where we are once again living. So my friends, thank you so much for joining and taking the time to be with us for this Hanukkah celebration of Israel. As always, such a treat and a special honor to be with you. And just wishing wherever you are, a Hanukkah Sameach, a happy Hanukkah, and God should bless you all with the light from the menorah and from Jerusalem, and just fill your lives with blessing and with peace. All the best and shalom.
Thank you, Akiva. Great tour. Thank you, everybody. Pauline and Renee, great to see you. Great to see you, everybody. Shalom. Happy Hanukkah. Happy Hanukkah, Peter, and happy Hanukkah, Cheryl. Bye, everybody. Shalom.
Happy Hanukkah.